Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name is Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk, and UK Astrologer. Hello, how are you? Now, I'm going to be covering two things today. One is where the planets are today, and what date am I having? I'm having the 26th of September 2021, and the time is 11:50 something. And I'm also going to be covering the chart for a guy called John Butler, who has his own YouTube channel. I mean, he didn't create it, a mate of his did. His YouTube channel is called, we find him now, YouTube Spiritual Unfoldment. Actually, I don't know if that's the name of his YouTube channel or anyway, that's the name of his website. Maybe he's interviewed by somebody on a thing called Conscious TV. And he proved to be very popular. He's been meditating since he was young. And he was an organic farmer, blah, blah, blah. So now the reason I'm using his chart is because at the moment, this gentleman, Mr. John Butler, is a Taurus. And at the moment, Uranus is retrograding in the sign of Taurus, and it's got past, I don't think it even got as far as 15 degrees. No, it didn't get as far as 15 degrees. And don't forget, there's 30 degrees to each sign of the zodiac, and it hasn't quite got to halfway through the sign of Taurus, and it's gone into another retrograde. And at this precise moment in time, we have Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto retrograding, and later on next month Mercury's going to join the party. This month, beg your pardon, I'm lying now. I was going to go away on holiday. Well, maybe I won't. Mercury retrogrades, oh my lord, tomorrow. What made me think it was going to be in October? Bum. Okay, so as from tomorrow, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto will retrograde. Do you know what it is? It's because I have to write all the stars a month in advance. I sometimes forget where I am and what's happening. Mercury retrograde starts tomorrow. We've got this, I'll just talk about a little bit about the news at the moment. There's a weird thing going on in the UK at the moment. There's a shortage of lorry drivers to take petrol or do anything really, but the petrol stations, there's not enough lorry drivers to deliver the petrol. In America you call it gas, the petrol to the petrol stations. So consequently people have now started panic buying, which is not the clever thing to do. They did that with the toilet rolls, you remember at the beginning of the pandemic. So all the people have been dashing out and buying petrol, so consequently the petrol stations have run out of petrol, and there's this shortage of drivers that I just sort of think, if that isn't a Uranus retrograded Taurus practical blumping thing, I don't know what it is. But yeah, as from tomorrow, that's how many planets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets. And the sun and the moon can't go retrograde, so the only two planets that won't be retrograding is Venus and Mars. And I hope they don't retrograde this year, because it's just going to be Venus retrogrades on the 19th of December. Jupiter and Saturn will be out of retrograde by then. Do you know, this year's a car crash. Mars is the only one that isn't retrograding. So there we go. Hello, how are you? So what shall I start with? Shall I start with talk about retrograde planets, or shall I start with John Butler? I'll start with John Butler because that's a little bit more optimistic. So there's this chap, and he's called John Butler, and he was born in Lincolnshire in the UK, and he was an organic farmer. He had quite an interesting life. I've listened to quite a few of the interviews of him and him doing his thing. And he did meditation. He was an organic farmer for a long time. He was married to I think she was called Sheila, but don't quote me, but he was married to this lady, and they ran this farm together and blah, 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 blah. And then eventually he decided he didn't want to do organic farming anymore because of the rules and regulations that are coming to be able to prove that you were organic. I think he was an early adopter of the Soil Association, they're called in the UK, and they're the ones that stipulate whether or not you can even call yourself organic. So it's a bit like, calling yourself vegan. You need to be sort of blessed by the gods of veganism. The same thing with organicness. You can't just not be organic. You've got to have all this accreditation and people coming expecting things and blah blah blah. Anyway, he wasn't into that. And he's done a lot of travelling. He's been to quite a few different countries. I think he went back to the place of birth of his mother, which I believe was Russia. And I've got no idea what time of day he was born. But eventually, long story short, he was interviewed by this chap on his YouTube channel, and he proved to be very popular because of the nature of his voice. He does have a very nice voice. Now, he's born in 1930, largely died 1937, so I can't maybe do the maths. So now, how old is he? Because he's had his birthday. Calculates, decided to die 2021 minus 1937. So today, he is 84. So he's having a Uranus return as we speak. Now, that's not what prompted him suddenly discovering overnight fame. Now, don't forget, he didn't do it himself. He was supported by other people that liked him. So he was not raised because of his own position in life. He was sort of raised to this place that he's at now by another person whose name I can't remember, and I won't go into it, but I think it's the fellow that does the Conscious TV. He's another UK person, and he sort of discovered him and does this regular. So he's obviously making a couple of bob out of the poor bloke. Or maybe the poor bloke himself is making the bob himself. But anyway, let's have a look at his chart, because he's a clear demonstration of what I'm going to talk about in a minute when we've done his chart about retrograde planets. So it's quite a complex chart he's got. Now, I can completely understand him not wanting to follow rules and regulations because, look, he's got sun sign Taurus, 24 degrees. I've used 6 a.m, okay, so everything could be shifted by a degree or two here or there, depending on what time of day he was born. I'm using 6 a.m. and whole sign method just to demonstrate the signs that each of his planets are in. So sun, Taurus, conjunct Mercury, retrograde in Taurus, conjunct Uranus. I don't think the sun's conjunct Uranus, no, it's out of orb, but the Mercury is. So he's got a little sort of sandwich thing. Uranus retrograde conjunct Mercury retrograde conjunct Uranus. So I'm going to have to teach myself. I don't want to be told what to do. I've said this so many times. If you've got Mercury retrograde, you're much better off. I know, because I have it myself. Much better off learning yourself. Obviously, being guided by someone and encouraged, and you can even be taught by someone, but finding the method that suits yourself. And pretty rebellious. If you're going to have Uranus near to your Mercury, you won't want anybody telling you what to do. And this is where he fell out with the Organic Association and didn't want to be a member anymore. I haven't done the dates for that. I mean, we're not going to pick his chart apart. So what I've got is the exact date that he became, inverted commas, famous on YouTube, and then the YouTube channel was created, and then I think later on the website was Spiritual Unfoldment. And in a nutshell, what he does he doesn't do it, this man, Conscious TV chappy man, interviews him, obviously. This bloke, do you know, this bloke was so, inverted commas, impressed by John Butler that he moved to live near him, and I think he even lived with him for a while. He doesn't anymore. So he does these weekly, I think they're weekly, God, I don't even think, are they daily or weekly? I think they're weekly interviews that he does with him and gets him talking about whatever, Mary going off form. So this is the date that the YouTube interview happened that had the millions of views. So we've got the date, which is nice. How exact can we be? 17th of September 2016. Now, because he's a Taurus, Taurus is ruled by Venus. So Venus in a Taurian's chart is an important thing to pay attention to. Same goes for Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. And on the date that this event happened, Uranus wasn't retrograding, but Uranus was exactly conjunct his natal Venus. So natal Venus is 20 degrees Aries, and Uranus on that date in 2016, because it ain't that now, because it's in Taurus now, Uranus was 23 and his Venus is 20. So that's pretty much a conjunction. We can live with that. And then also, if you look on his chart, you'll see he's got sun sign Leo. The sun and the moon, Mary, wake up. He's got moon sign Leo. The sun and moon aren't square, but Mercury and the moon are square, so it's not too good. And the moon is in Leo, so he's talking about enlightenment all the time because he had it. And he tells the story of when now I did do the planets for that and they weren't that significant, so I don't know what went on there. It must have been ascendancing. When he was 47, I think it was, he was heavily into meditating, doing his organic garden, was in the car with a friend, female friend, they were both married, and he said that he had a vision and he saw their two souls, so hers and his, sort of melting together, and he just had this vision after his meditation. God, the things people get up to in meditation. Don't for 1 minute think that people that meditate have purity of thoughts. That's not true. They don't. The thoughts can still go over the place and weird stuff. Anyway, he just saw their souls uniting, and because he was married, she was married. As far as I'm aware, nothing happened, and then he went into a manic depression for millions of years, and then he raised himself out of it again by using the meditation. All of these things are on the YouTube channel, which I would put a link to if you're interested to listen. Now, don't forget, he's a Christian, I'm not, so if I get a little bit sloppy about whatever, I'm a pagan, so Christianity's cool. And he's talking about God and consciousness and light, and he's done lots of lectures, and they're monologues. So he's interviewed by this other chap who's most of the time not in the shot, but every now and again he will be. But the majority of the time, John is monologuing and quite happy, perfectly happy to talk about himself. Now, on the date that the YouTube thing happened, you'll see he's got natally Neptune retrograde in Virgo, okay, so wanting to touch the divine in a pure way, but a pure and unusual way. The date that this happened, and in the interview he's talking about his whole consciousness thing, Mercury is retrograde exactly, let's see what the maths is. Neptune is Mercury is transiting 16 degrees retrograde to his natal Neptune. Look, 16 degrees, that's slap bang bing. Now his natal Neptune makes a trine to his sun sign. So this is somebody that, we can quite understand him wanting to meditate in his own way, because the sun trines to Neptune. It doesn't matter that Neptune's retrograde, but it's in the sign of Virgo, so that's a generation that's more into purity of connecting to the consciousness. Mine's in Scorpio, so it's about sort of deepness. The sun was there as well, illuminating thing. The north node's moon moved as well. That's sort of conjunctifying quite a lot of it. The sun's there. Venus is in Libra, so ruling planet of the chart in its natural home as a transit, and Jupiter's there. Saturn is now directly conjunct his natal north node. Mars is splashing about the place, not too much. Pluto is also retrograde, and Neptune's retrograde. So on the date that this event happened, Mercury was retrograde, which he has natally anyway. Uranus was retrograde, which he doesn't have natally. Neptune was retrograde, which he does have natally. And Pluto was retrograde, which he doesn't have natally. And Pluto was opposite. His natal Pluto is an exact opposite. His natal Pluto is 26 degrees Cancer, and transiting Pluto's retrograde 14. It's not exact. it's opposite, but it hasn't got to exactness because we need to have 8 degrees. So it's pretty much, what's the word? A definitive date for something to happen. Now, I'm of the impression that if we're going to say what caused this is Uranus, because it was unexpected. Nobody, himself included, expected the interview to become, I don't know, loads of views, or for him then to become chummy and happy with the other chappie and have his own channel and sell all these books that he's written. He's done a lot of self-publishing, and it is all about, I think they've all got the same title, spiritual, mythic this, wonders of, mythic this. He's done a series, mythic this, mythic that, mythic the other. So the wonders of spiritual unfoldment, that's the bestseller. Mythic approaches, mythic forbearance. I listened to that one. He's talking about going to Russia and being there for a while, and that in Russia forbearance is what they're good at. I can't read the title of that one. It's a funny picture. That is mystic burning, mystic naturally, mystic approaches, mystic forbearance, which I can't read that. Oh, mystic beginnings, mystic approaches. There's a DVD, The Good Farmer. Blah de blah. Okay, now he's not going to mind being interviewed or shining. He has moon in Leo. His moon is perfectly happy doing that. Now, whether or not he would have the capabilities to operate a computer and do it all himself, well, I'll leave you to guess. Probably not. And he is doing pretty well with that, and it's and I believe that there's a community of people that feel sort of tingly when they listen to certain voices, and he's got that type of voice that if you listen to it, it'll be a bit tingly. So I will put a link to the YouTube channel, so have a little listen to his voice. It is a nice voice to listen to, and you can sort of imagine if he was doing a meditation, a guided meditation for you, you'd probably enjoy that. It is a very soothing voice. Now, I have no idea what he's like as a person. I don't know if he's ever had any children. I don't think so. I don't know. I'm not vouching for him one way or the other. Today's podcast is to talk about the fact that he exists, and it's a demonstration of a retrograde planet that he's born with, numbers of them, and then an event happening when an outer planet's retrograde, because today the outer planets, a whole chunk of them, and tomorrow there's going to be even more, and I can't believe that I've booked to go away, and maybe we shouldn't because we won't have enough petrol to get back. But anyway, that's next week. So that's John, okay? I have done a chart for, it's not worth sharing or talking about, but I'll just quickly tell you, he's having his Uranus return as we speak, and Uranus is retrograde. It wasn't retrograde when he was born, but it's retrograding now, and you sort of wonder, oops, when you get to that age, fine old age, mind, it'll be squaring to his natal moon, and you sort of think, ooh, 80-something, Uranus return, great, but what happens during I would be worried if it was me, but I'm not him. So that's just a quick skip around John Butler's chart. You can find him on YouTube. You can find his website. His website is in his name, spiritualunfoldment.co.uk. Okay, so I'll put the link to that as well. So let's talk now about today. And I'm going to quote, and I'm not going to blurb like I did the other week, mistakenly reading that astronomy book by whatever his name is, The Astrologer's Astronomical Handbook by Jeff Mayer. I got told off by a student. It was so funny. Well, I didn't get told off, but she just said, oh, Mary, you lost me. So I'm just going to quote some little bits about retrograde planets. We have discussed retrograde planets before, and we had the lovely interview with Gregory Roszak. I had to pause there for a minute because I couldn't remember if his name was Greg Roszak or Gregory, and it's Gregory Rosak. So that's episode 181, and actually it's linking to today. Episode 149 is about Extinction Rebellion and the chappie that started that, Roger Hallam, who's also a Taurus. So it's, you know, how do people react under retrograde planets, or in fact how do people react under Uranus? And Uranus is in Taurus, and I have to say that I am seeing numbers of Taurus clients now, because Uranus is halfway through the sign. So this sort of managed up until now. It doesn't matter what what degree your sun sign is. When the Uranus retrograde gets to be halfway through the sign, it's going to be affecting someone somewhere, just for the maths of it, because it's 30 degrees to each sign. So it's either affecting the people that were the early degrees of Taurus or the later degrees of Taurus, but we're nearly halfway through. So Taurians, I'm not saying they're flooding into practice, because I don't have a flooded practice, but there are more Taurians. So I'm just going to go through Erin Sullivan's wonderful book, and I've talked about hers before, Retrograde Planets Traversing the Inner Landscape, published by Arcana Contemporary Astrology. I do think it will cost you gazillions of pounds to buy the book, and I apologise, I think it's out of print. Now, she says about transiting Jupiter retrograde. Jupiter's position in the solar system is such that its cycle is the perfect paradigm for the cycles of all superior planets beyond its orbit. Jupiter is virtually at a standstill for about 4 days before it actually stations and begins retrogression, the trine from the Sun following about 4 to 6 days later. Jupiter spends almost exactly 1 year in each sign. Well, you know that. Its annual stations occur about 1 month later each year and a few degrees later in each successive sign. Its retrograde period lasts between 115 and 120 days. It's retrograding at the moment in the sign of Aquarius. Is that right? Yes. During which time it backtracks approximately 10 degrees and stations direct about 4 to 6 days after the trine from the Sun. Now, does she just give us a bit of blurb about... Yes. If planets can be said to have intent, Jupiter's purpose in its retrograde cycle is to connect one with a deeper and more personal sense of justice, not jurisprudence, but that which is correct for one's integral balance and health. Often our own inner sense of what is right and wrong is unconsciously suppressed, subordinated to accepted values and moral codes, whether these are social or defined within a special relationship. Jupiter's retrograde cycle is the annual opportunity to contemplate and reflect upon aspects of our life in which we need to explore our personal code of ethics. Okay, now this applies to us all, and even more so if you've got planets in Aquarius, or you are an Aquarius, or you were born with Jupiter in the sign of Aquarius, because it's retrograding back. Okay, transiting Saturn retrograde. The transiting Sun-Saturn opposition can happen 1 to 3 times in a house, depending on its side. Well, it doesn't apply because I'm using equal house, not clusters, because Saturn spends close to 2.5 years in each sign, stationing and turning retrograde on an annual basis. The planet's annual stations occur about 13 days later each year. It appears at a standstill for 4 or 5 days before it actually turns retrograde, and is followed by a trine from the Sun about 12 days after the station. It remains in the retrograde phase for about 130 days, backtracking through an average of 6 degrees, and about 12 days before it stations and turns direct, it is in a trine to the Sun again. Okay, now Gregory told us that retrograding planets, about the distance that they will go and how far they are away and stuff. So that's what our Erin's talking about there. So not all Saturn stationary retrograde periods coincide with endings. Although externally they may appear to do so, they're truly a beginning of an entirely new relationship with one's environment and one's own inner feelings of power and authority. The station begins a process in which a container, a chrysalis, is constructed within which mysterious unconscious processes begin to metamorphose. There's usually a theme. Normally one is subtly aware of a necessary shift or change, but instinctively resists. The homeostatic principle charges to the rescue, halting any overt or immediate action. There's an intrinsic guarantee that what emerges at the end of the 9-month gestation cycle is considerably different from what was imagined. Okay, so that's Saturn transiting retrograde. And these are all ones we've got at the moment. So transiting Uranus retrograde. So Uranus transits suddenly disengage us from what have been secure points of reference. Being catapulted into deep space, we're left to explore what at first appears to be alien territory. Now this is going on for Taurians, okay? So Taurus, pick your ears up. With each successive direct transit, we're increasingly separated from the known, but the subsequent retrograde phase reconnects back to an aspect of ourselves from which we've been cut off and desensitized. The initial transit of Uranus to a natal planet or angle is often shocking, bringing with it acute attacks of anxiety and fear. Uranus is a celestial alarm clock, a rude awakening to the aspects within our nature which have been lying dormant and untried. The successive transits work to dislodge hidden traits from which we've been consciously separated, either from birth or in the natural process of early training. Since Uranus spends approximately 7 years in a sign, its retrograde transit cycles, like the other outer planets, will accumulate a history of activity over the years that it spends transiting one house. Uranus transits frequently coincide with an abrupt separation from something that was once of high personal value. The real danger lurking in Uranus transits is potential alienation from the most fundamental aspects of life and concentration on the ideal. So that's Uranus, that's going on for Taurians. And then we've got, where's my bookmark on? We've got Neptune. Some Pisces. Neptune's lengthy sojourn in a house. Which house is it in mine? It's in the 7th. Will produce a series of Sun-Neptune oppositions over the years, their number depending on the size of the house. Doesn't apply in that equal house because the size is the same. Because it spends 14 years in each sign, a Neptune transit can last many more than 14 years in a large house. There are no large houses in equal house. Its effects are less shocking than its relatives Uranus or Pluto, but no less effective in the long term. The underlying intent of Neptune retrograde is gently to dissolve the boundaries of the known universe and submerge the planets it contacts into a prenatal condition. Each inversion period of Neptune smoothly dislodges one from a previously certain attitude or perception, immersing in a primordial sea any planetary principle it contacts in its course. Fantasies of a perfect world are created and gradually undone as Neptune transits a house. The retrograde cycles perform the untethering ritual. The annual Sun-Neptune opposition marks a period in which the greatest losses of ego, control and boundaries occur. Whether or not it becomes immediately apparent, and it is a feature of Neptune that it should not, there's a disintegration of worldly form. With each successive cycle, illusions are swept away and new ones are instated. The solid world of what appears to be reality shifts and changes shape, enriching one with new and more elaborate images of what the world is. The dissolution and resolution cycles are part of the natural phenomenon of the ever-evolving perceptions that we have of life itself. But the erosion of boundaries between ourselves and our world can be frightening and disorientating, especially when the planet repeatedly contacts personal points. Don't I know it? And then the last one, Pluto, which is retrograding. Lord help us in Capricorn. So the ultimate test of Pluto retrograde transits is to maintain integrity in the face of fateful circumstances, which are symbolically related to disintegration, death, and renewal. Pluto requires that one descend into the deepest recesses of one's soul to stand alone and find integrity, value and security in that isolation. The power of a Pluto transit partly lies in the fact that it's a singular experience. There's no rehearsal, nor is any one Pluto transit over a planet a preparation for a future Pluto transit over another planet. There may be themes, however, carried over from one to another if a stellium is involved. I know a lot of you listening have that, but the actual experience is totally unique. Pluto's transit over a single degree of a sign can occur as many as 5 times over a period of 3 years, which in certain degrees can mean at least a 5-year time span before it leaves the orb of influence. Pluto transits often act as an underlying theme for more quickly passing transits or cycles, and are often the end result of a 3 or 4 year life transition in which there has been a multitude of other progressions and transit cycles. Thank you, Erin. So we're part of that at the moment. It's just like, anything that you thought was how things were at the moment isn't the case. Now, obviously, every retrograde cycle affects people differently. Some people can swim quiet through it, totally oblivious to what's going on. Also, big pardon. Yes, Saturn is. So I was looking at next month. Go back to September, and yeah, they can be totally oblivious to it because they're. I think if your ego is really enormous, you will not be conscious at all of a retrograde cycle. If you've worked on yourself a bit, then you're more likely to feel it and feel the process. I mean, I've been under this lengthy Neptune one, and this is the book that I've written, Neptune in Pisces, an astrological search for enlightenment, that is progressing, and I won't tell you how difficult it's been at the moment, but it's in production. The book is in production. It will be produced at some point. And then I even found out that publishers are having problems getting paper. Anyway, it'll be an ebook, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's being created. You can't sort of push a birthing process. Well, I suppose you could take some drugs, but I don't want to do that. I mean, drugs to assist a birthing process. That's what I was talking about that. And with all these planets, so I tend to recommend to people with so many retrograding at the moment and Mercury just about to do it, is probably not start something new. Probably go back and go over what has been done. Starting a new project under a 6 planet, is it 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, a 6 planetary retrograde is asking for a lot of confusion. And it's, if you imagine like you're a fisherman. I hate fishermen, but anyway, but if you're a fisherman, you put your line out into the sea or the water or whatever, and the fishy catches it, and then you've got to wind the line back in. That's what a retrograde thing is. But remembering, of course, that you could be winding it back in and there could be a rock at the end of it, or you could be winding it back in, and if you're a fisherman you want there to be a fish. But the whole process of the retrograde thing is, maybe I do need to go back and review whichever planet it is, whichever house it's going through. What do I need to review, rethink, redo, reimagine, whatever? So just stick in front of it. And I know I've banged on a lot about retrograde planets, but I just don't think people truly understand them. And I suppose you've got to be born with some to understand them and the complexity of them. But to reassure you that if you do have your retrograde planets in your chart, you're less likely to fall to bits when masses of planets retrograde again. In fact, you might come into your own. I mean, I've got a number of retrograde planets. If I chart you off the top of my head, I can't remember how many I've got. Just 1 minute, I'll have a look. There we go, I thought I did. I've got Mercury, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto retrograde. So, okay, maybe I need to cheer up a bit then, those 3 outer planets going retrograde. I was born under that, so I should know what that feels like. That that made me feel a bit better actually doing those. It's like, take your own medicine, Mary. But I don't have Jupiter or Saturn retrograde, which is what's happening at the moment. Those retrogrades don't last forever, and as I say, this year will finish. Where's my ephemeris gone? Because I was just quoting from that. Come back. He's disappeared. So we're in September. So Jupiter finishes its retrograde on the 18th of October. So, yeah, and Saturn finishes its retrograde, so it goes direct on the 11th of October. So it's not long to wait. It's only next month. So it's not quite so bad. But just at the minute, it's just that everything is untangling. Have you ever knitted or crocheted or sewed? Have you ever had a knot? Do you know, one thing I really love is undoing knots and undoing tangles and stuff. And that's what I sometimes imagine it's like during a retrograde, that you can, by loosening up the wool and pulling it about a bit, get to be able to untangle things. So whatever's going on for you at the moment, if it's difficult, sending lots of cyber hugs your way. Retrograde planets was what we were discussing today. We were using a demonstration chart for John Butler, and he is part of a website called Spiritual Unfoldment, and he's a Christian, so he talks about Christianity. That's fine, that's his thing, and he has a lovely voice, and you can go and check him out on YouTube. So I'll be back next week. I hope you have a fab week. I will, if I'm not going away, I'll be pre-recording it, and if I'm going away, I'll be pre-recording it. If I'm not going away, I won't be pre-recording it. I'm just gibbering now. So I'll see you next week. I hope you have a fab week. Bye bye now.